Yes, close games. Haven't seen one of those for a while, but the Pacers remember how to do it. They beat the Hawks in a game that had no business being close. Siakam was a great closer. Nembhard was great all night. Ben Shepherd, Aaron Nesmith brought the energy, and the Pacers have got to figure out these big leads. It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Saturday/Sunday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today the Pacers played a close game. I forgot what this is like to watch and to cover. They shouldn't have played a close game. They were up big early. They blew it. A big lead, a huge problem for them, but they get it done late. Siakam was a master when it mattered. Andrew Nembhard was great pretty much all night. Aaron Nesmith was incredibly impactful, and the Pacers reminded everyone, hey, they can still win these games that matter, even though, man, oh man, do they have a problem with these big leads. We'll dive into all that today as the Pacers just played their final home game before the trade deadline. I'm still here in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, sitting in front of their Fever display. If you want more on the Fever's free agency moves, Natasha Howard, Sophie Cunningham coming in at the next. You can read my stories about that, or on my personal YouTube channel. I have videos up on it once we know more about their big trade. Pacerland 132-127 is the final for the Pacers. Yikes. Every Pacers-Hawks game is just crazy with scoring and nonsense, but I mean, this one should not have been like this for the Pacers at all. I mean, this was not disappointing. The Pacers won. The Hawks aren't a joke, although this was the Hawks' 8th straight loss. And it still was tough for the Pacers, who were running away with it early, right? And I think this has been maybe not the lead I wanted to go with, but what I am going to go with because it's the story of the game. The Pacers were awesome early, 40-24 at the end of the first quarter, and they stunk for the first 2.5 minutes. They were down 5. I think with 8:30 to go in the first quarter, they had only scored 4 points. They scored 36 in 8.5 minutes to close the first quarter. Maybe that was the anomaly. They were just abnormally hot for that stretch. But after that, they're up 16. They score first in the second quarter. They go up 18, and it felt like, man, we've seen these Pacers-Hawks games look like this, where the Pacers can just score whenever they want, however they want. Like, the poor Hawks are just too banged up. They have no chance. Their bench lineup with Trae Young, Larry Nance, DeAndre Hunter, Vic Krejci, and Garrison Matthews, how is that going to guard anybody? I thought it was over at that point. Truly, the Pacers looked like a buzzsaw at that point on both ends, scoring however they wanted. They had a lot of plays go their way. A busted play leads to an Obi Toppin 3. The next play, an airball 3, bounces right to Obi Toppin. They didn't even play that well, and they scored 40 points. But then they continued to not play well, but it didn't lead to points. And that's where this game flipped. And what should have been a sign early that maybe they weren't going to continue to have an easy game is that the second quarter saw their 18-point lead dwindle all the way down to 1. They were still winning by halftime, but this is becoming a problem for the Pacers, right? They held on late, and I think the close to the game is probably the most important thing for them because they hadn't played a clutch game the entire calendar year to this point. They've got to solve this, right? And the trouble I have actually talking about this coherently in terms of blowing big leads, what it actually means, why it's happening, is it feels like it happens for a different reason all the time, right? Today, for example, they were mixing, they hockey subbed in the first quarter, and it worked great. Like, the 5-man bench group was solid. They were still up, 10, 15-ish when starters trickled back in the second quarter. The Hawks went zone against that group. They beat the zone, but then they still gave the lead away, right? It was starters against normal defense, and they couldn't get enough stops. They couldn't run. I have my theories on why they blew the lead today, right? I can talk about this game and will, but the problem with the Pacers and this becoming a habit, right? Lots of games where, the Bucks game, the last one they had clutch time in before the new year. That game had, they were up huge. They blew that one. The Memphis game, everybody remembers, a great deal. They've won a lot of these. Of course, they've won a lot of games in general this calendar year. Philly, San Antonio, even though they won that one, they get up big and they can't hold it. Regardless of that, if they knew the problem, they would fix it. And the trouble I have breaking it down, and Tyrese Haliburton, by the way, that's how he answered my question about it today. He said, if we knew what was going on, we'd fix it. But that's the problem I have with it is it's like a different thing every time. Every time they blow a lead, it's something different. It's the bench group. It's the way they approach zone. It's this lineup. It's this guy they can't guard. It's this cold stretch. Maybe that's a team symptom. It's just that they get a little loose with leads, and it bleeds into everybody. But they needed their energy givers to save them today, and Aaron Nesmith and Ben Shepherd did at times in this game. But this is something they're going to have to address because, it's making games that they are comfortably holding a talent advantage in much harder than they need to be. That said, said talent advantage certainly mattered late. Pacers figured it out in a very tight second half, right? The third quarter was 31-31. The fourth quarter was 33-32. So a 1-point Pacers win in the second half to get this one done. But this game to me was about crunch time. Pacers, like I said, first clutch game this calendar year, and it looked like it was not going to go their way. Tied late, Hawks up 3 in the final 5 minutes. Looked like a game the Pacers were going to go, man, we blew it, we had it, and we couldn't get it done, right? The Hawks' biggest lead late, 119-116 after a monster Trae Young 3 with 4 minutes and 25 seconds to go. But the Pacers were not deterred. They had a lot of answers late in this game, and I think their clutch time play showed what they can be at their best when they're focused and razor sharp on the end of the floor. Andrew Nembhard answers that 3 with a banked and one. He was very composed tonight, and I thought he was so important offensively because he was the guy Trae Young was guarding. Dyson Daniels was on Tyrese Haliburton, and Dyson Daniels was terrific in this game. I think the Pacers were smart to not play through Haliburton because of those matchups. Why would they play against a much more talented defender when Nembhard is clearly good enough to take advantage of that Trae Young matchup? That tied the game. Andrew Nembhard did. And then a crucial stretch happened with 4 minutes to go. They force a miss on a Trae Young layup, but they don't get the rebound. Dyson Daniels does. Dyson Daniels, wide open putback layup, chance to put the Hawks back in the lead, and he smokes it. And this is where the Pacers, this was their first moment to take advantage of a Hawks mistake in a while. Hawks scoring or getting stops with ease pretty much for 3 or 4 minutes up to that point, leading or tied for much of the fourth quarter. They come down, and Siakam, who, believe it or not, I thought was playing a pretty pedestrian, kind of quiet game until crunch time. Siakam, bang, 3-pointer on a pass from Andrew Nembhard, just 19 seconds into the shot clock. That was a huge shot. They force a miss on a DeAndre Hunter 3. They come down, and Siakam flings a pass over to Aaron Nesmith, who has not been shooting well since returning, and he, bang, drilled the corner 3. His shot, his set, fell off after the game, but that one was huge. And all of a sudden, Siakam, their star, who had not, again, particularly been playing well, both statistically or in terms of what he was just doing, and in terms of impact, 2 huge offensive plays in a row put the Pacers up 6. That was enough, right? They rode that 6-point lead into crunch time thanks to their only other made shot the rest of the game, a Pascal Siakam 6-foot turnaround to put him up 5 with 1:47 to go. He was huge when this game mattered to erase a lot of the doubts about his game, and that's all they needed. They got enough stops late. They made every clutch free throw they took. Credit to Nesmith and Haliburton for stepping up there when it mattered, and so they gave up a 2-pointer. They didn't really care about that in the final minute. Trae Young hit a huge deep 3 off of a miscommunication on the Pacers defensive end, but outside of that miscommunication, the Hawks only hit 1 shot in the final 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So they actually hit 2, to be clear, but a lot of one was on a just awful miscommunication. So the Pacers defense was pretty good late, and that led into their offense surging and Siakam coming up. And it's crazy to say this felt like a quiet Siakam game. He finished with 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. That's the standard he set where, when he enters crunch time with 11 or 12 points, it doesn't feel like it, right? He was exceptional when it mattered. And the Pacers were, in general, great on both ends late. And that's what, to me, got this game away from them, is what they didn't do late. I was trying to talk with people in Media Row. We were like, what just happened in the second quarter of this game? The Hawks scored 40 points in the second quarter right after the Pacers had that 40-point first quarter. And I couldn't quite figure out why this game turned to the extent it did. It didn't feel like the Pacers were getting, awful shots. They weren't turning it over a ton. No one was completely neutralized. To me, it's just that the Hawks were scoring pretty easily. 40 points is obviously very damning of the Pacers' defensive efforts. They were scoring pretty easily, and they weren't turning it over at all. They only had 1 turnover in that quarter. So I took some notes, right? Of the Pacers, typical style, they want to hit the open floor and at least play with some tempo. They only had 4 fast break points in the second quarter. They had way more than that in the first quarter. Just 1 turnover for the Hawks in the second quarter, and 40 points means you're dragging the ball to the net the whole time. The Pacers just couldn't get any speed going. Credit to the Hawks. They went zone just enough to slow the Pacers down. So the Pacers actually scored okay against the zone, but in general, all of that in tandem really just slowed the game to a pace that made more sense for the Hawks and their available personnel than the Pacers. And so in the second half, even though the Pacers weren't that good, in fact, they gave up 63 points, they'll probably be very disappointed with their defense. They were quicker on their inbounds plays. They were getting into their sets faster. They just found some juice, enough life to keep themselves in it and get this one done, because it looked like they were losing their identity and style there for a minute. And the Hawks deserve a ton of credit for that. The Pacers deserve a ton of ridicule for not playing up to their standard at that time. But once they figured out what was going wrong for them and what the Hawks were actually doing to slow them down, I thought they did a good job finding the answers. And then in crunch time, the only all-star on the team, his first game since being named an all-star for the Pacers. He was honored before the game with a nice sign on the Jumbotron. Came up late. Huge game from Siakam when it mattered. And Pacers get this one done in the first quarter. right? Without that first quarter, they were destroyed the rest of the way. Very even second half. Second quarter was all Hawks, but that shows the importance of a hot start, and the Pacers get it done in crunch time. Like I said, if you want to go sort the clutch stats for the NBA out on NBA.com, you'll see only 29 teams are listed. It's because the Pacers did not play a crunch time game this calendar year until today, until February, a whole month without them. Their 2 losses were by 10 plus. All their wins were by 11 plus. No crunch time, right? Kind of forgot what it looked like for the Pacers, who last time they were in crunch time were a disaster. Giannis kicked their butt. They couldn't score, and they lost. And the Hawks aren't as good as the Bucks, but they're not a joke. They're banged up, but Trae Young's good. Dyson Daniels was awesome. And the Pacers were much better in the final 5 minutes than the Atlanta Hawks tonight. A nice reminder of what this team can do. And I've said this before in their stretch where they're playing better, and some of this is like a little damning with faint praise because they were so bad against this kind of team early in the season. But what's supposed to happen is what happened today. If you're a good team and you're not playing well, you still have enough talent and ability to find a way to win. And they did in this game with good crunch time play, good second half adjustments, a strong start, solid rotational decisions, right? Neesmith and Shepherd coming in at the same time to provide a lot of juice. The bench in general was very good. We'll get to that in a second. That's what happens when you're a good team. You find a way to win these ugly games instead of losing to Charlotte and Toronto and Brooklyn all in the same week. And the Pacers did that early in the season. They beat Detroit on the road when they played quite poorly. They didn't play great against Boston for the final 8 minutes. They found a way to sneak out that one. I mean, they played well for the first 3 quarters of that game, but I could go through a couple more examples. The game they actually did win against Orlando, they weren't particularly good. That 3-game homestand they had against Washington, New Orleans, and Portland, where they snuck out all 3 of those, they didn't play particularly good. That's true. They were doing that early, but they also were losing a ton of terrible games early, and they have not done that since the year flipped. In fact, all of their losses since that Charlotte loss have been very fine losses. OKC, Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and San Antonio in the Wemby show. That's a fine group of losses. And so the fact that they've matured enough to find ways to win games that they're not playing particularly well, and something they only did about half the time, I would say, early in the season has been a huge step for their maturity. The fact that they remembered how to play in clutch time for the first time in a while in their last home game until the deadline says a lot about their maturity. And the fact that their stars found ways to get it done when it mattered, despite a great, all NBA defensive level player on Tyrese Haliburton tonight, who still was solid with 17 and 9 and was great in the first quarter, and finding ways to play through Andrew Nembhard, who was exceptional with his 19 points and 5 assists and excellent defense, as good as it gets on Trae Young, who was awesome still, but 42% from the field for Trae Young with 5 turnovers. Yeah, 8, 34, and 17, but would have had more if it weren't for Andrew Nembhard. They found ways to get it done, and that's what they needed to do, but they have stuff to solve, clearly. The big lead thing, they've got to figure it out. I mean, look, I get that in the modern NBA with the way threes go, that no lead is truly safe, but it's not even necessarily to me that the Pacers lose big leads. I watch, I have to watch every team for Locked On NBA, and I like watching the NBA. Like, lots of teams lose leads, but the Pacers lose them fast. That, to me, is what stands out as their difference between other teams. Like today, it was just the second quarter, basically. They go from up 18 to up 1. They're losing very early in the third quarter. Like that is what makes the third quarter against the Spurs in Paris in that second game. The third quarter against the Bucks, that game, they were basically like 5 minutes away from the Bucks giving up. Instead, they lost. Like that is what stands out about the Pacers to me, is they just avalanche out of these big leads. But today, they recovered. They did a great job to recover. They pushed the right buttons late. They found a rotation that worked, and they got themselves into a situation where their stars could carry them to a win. And they did. And primarily it was Pascal Siakam who did that. But that's what a win looks like when you play bad and you're a good team. And that's what the Pacers are right now. They're a good team. You know why? Because they keep winning. And they are now 4th in the East. The Bucks lost last night. Pacers win tonight means the Pacers half a game in the win column ahead of Milwaukee. They've played more games and the Bucks have the tiebreaker. So it's a little flimsy right now how that looks. But huge win. Pacers keep winning. Huge win. They still could have home court in the first round if they keep playing this way as they head out west. Much more I want to talk about from this game. The bench was great. Neesmith closed, and so much more on Locked On Pacers. Before we do any of that, though, we need to talk about FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That is on FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59. Back here on Locked On Pacers here on the weekend. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen's got to be Locked On Hawks, obviously. Brad Rowland doing his best to cover a Hawks team that's lost 8 in a row. A couple close ones recently. They're super banged up. Everybody gets what's happening with the Hawks, but they are not playing well at all as they continue to stumble down the standings. 22-27 now are the Hawks. And I don't want to call anything now, right? Not even 50 games into the season. But a win like this and the Magic skid, the Pacers are now 6 games up on the 9 seed and 4.5 games up on the 8 seed. They're doing well to put themselves in position to make the playoffs, and they're certainly doing well that even a surge from all 3 of Detroit, Miami, and Orlando, they'd still probably be in the top bracket of the play-in field. They're still doing pretty well, and their tiebreakers outside of Milwaukee, they could be even or better in every single one that's going to matter. Their remaining Miami games will matter, especially because that division winner is going to be Miami or Orlando. But this is a big win in that way, too. Keep pushing the Hawks down, and if the Atlanta, Chicago, Philly group continues to kind of flounder, to put it kindly, the Pacers will be in prime position to have 2 lives to get into the playoffs at worst. And I don't think that is, the pessimistic way of looking at it, right? They're in 4th right now. They're only is a stretch. They're 4.5 games behind the Knicks and 4.5 games ahead of the Magic. They're firmly in between the top tier and kind of the last tier of like incredibly good, could win around teams. So hosting would be huge. And they certainly have the ability to stay in 4th and keep winning and keep playing like this. But as they beat the Hawks and as the Magic lose to the Jazz tonight and they lost to Portland the other night, Portland's playing well, to be fair. That's going to be a tough one for the Pacers coming up. But regardless, I'm saying a lot here to say this kind of win shows that the Pacers are looking very good towards making the playoffs after their awful start, and that's why this one was important. Speaking of important, the Pacers bench today was awesome. Terrific Pacers bench game. I mean, the plus minuses tell the story, of the Hawks bench players. Keaton Wallace minus 13, DeAndre Hunter minus 15, Larry Nance minus 15, Vic Krejci minus 10, Garrison Matthews was pretty good. He was at plus 9, but they couldn't get anything going with their second unit in the slightest. Those guys can't defend at all, and the Pacers bench did a really good job of tearing them up. Ben Shepherd was 2 for 3. He played good defense. He had 5 rebounds and 4 assists, Ben Shepherd did. Aaron Nesmith was exceptional. We'll talk more about him in a second for more specific reasons, but 13 points for him. He had 2 big threes. He was plus 21. TJ McConnell had 6 assists. He had 4 fouls, which is something he would like back, but he was a good floor general. Didn't need to shoot very much. In this one, only played 11 minutes as the Pacers squeezed out as much as they could from their other point guards. And Thomas Bryant has been the same reliable player every single game that he plays. The big difference from the most recent game the Pacers played here against Detroit and today with their bench was Obi Toppin was awesome in this game. Obi Toppin was not good against the Pistons. Maybe his worst game of the year, statistically near the bottom. Today, 8 for 11 was Obi Toppin. He only missed 1 2-point shot the whole game. 9 rebounds. He was fighting hard on the glass, and that was big for the Pacers. They could get in transition. He can push himself, and he had 18 points off the bench. I believe this tied the Pacers franchise record for most players with 15-plus points in a game. Toppin joins that group with 18 points in just 15 and a half minutes. He was very good today, and the Hawks didn't have good answers for him. I talked about their bench group. Vic Krejci's an okay defender, I guess, but they had nothing really. DeAndre Hunter's he has size, but he's not that good of a defender. They had no defenders on their second unit. Toppin was driving to the basket. Usually if Obi Toppin takes 11 shots, like half of them will be threes in a game. If he's got that many chances to get shots up in this game, he was putting it on the floor, and it was working. He deserved all 8 2-pointers. He created a lot of them for himself. He was very good in this game. And Rick Carlisle talked post-game about how the bench was energy givers, which was important. Not that the Pacers starters were bad. In fact, Haliburton was the only one of them who shot under 50%. He still made 3 threes and had 9 assists. It's just the Pacers were kind of lethargic at times in this game. Slower pace, not in it. It took them, I think someone tweeted at me that the broadcast showed a clip of Haliburton going to the bench at one point in the second half saying, what are we doing, right? It felt like that a lot of this game for the Pacers. And that bench group was huge in that, Nesmith mentioned after the game that when he and Shepherd came in, and they came in together twice, maybe 3 times in this game, he said, hey, let's be energy givers, right? And they needed that, and those 2 guys certainly did that. Let's talk about Aaron Nesmith, who played 23 minutes in this game. He's now played over 23 games in a row, over 30 in one of those. 4 for 8 today for Nesmith. Revealing moment, right? that the Pacers now let's add some context. I'm not saying a final decision has been made on how the Pacers are going to run their rotation or use lineups. Ben Mathurin was sick in their last game, and Rick Carlisle told us before the game, before he knew there'd be crunch time, he said Mathurin's probably going to be a little more tired than normal. We'll have to take him out quicker. And they did, right? They took him out, 4 or 5 minutes into both halves. Mathurin played 24 minutes. Every other starter played over 30. That's not an anti-Mathurin thing from Carlisle. He told us that. And the reason before the game even started, nothing to do with how Mathurin was playing. In fact, I get that Mathurin is minus 16. I thought he was really good. He made some huge shots, and the minutes with him on the floor would have been worse than minus 16 if he didn't play that way. His defense could certainly have been better. I'm not saying he was perfect, but he had especially an offensive fine game. Regardless of those takes, Pacers' first crunch time game in ages since last year, and Aaron Nesmith was in the closing five. It was the starters from last year, and when they could sub offense, defense for foul reasons, for timeout reasons, whatever, Ben Shepherd was on for Haliburton on the defensive end, right? So clearly the Pacers set that hierarchy today, and Nesmith deserved it. He was tremendous, given energy, trapping on defense, causing problems in this game. That's why he was plus 21. His 13 points were vital. Of course, 4 fouls, is something he'll maybe never clean up in his career, just given the way he plays defense. But I thought him and Shepherd were both very good, and I thought it was noteworthy that Nesmith closed. We'll see when Mathurin is healthy, though, right? Don't read into this too much. Like I've said before about rotational stuff, but they are fully healthy, and that did happen. Speaking of fully healthy, and that did happen, Jarris Walker, first DNP of the season. They didn't have a big – I thought when they were up 16 in the first quarter, they were going to have a big enough wiggle room to get Jarris some minutes, but it got too close. They couldn't do it. They couldn't play 11 and break the rhythm of their lineups. No minutes for Jarris Walker. That's what I thought would be the case. I'm not saying it's good. That's just what I thought would be reality for the Pacers as they keep pushing forward this season, and someone else will get hurt this year, right? It's just how the NBA goes. But this is his first DNP. It is noteworthy that the rotational hierarchy has shaken out the way that it has, and he had played well the last month that he was playing every night, but unfortunately someone has to draw the short stick, and Jarris Walker was that guy. Myles Turner in this game played 34 minutes. They needed him to play quite often in this one because Onyeka Okongwu was quite good with 12 points and 11 boards. Turner hit 2 threes. Thought his defense was pretty good. The ball movement from every Pacer was good. He had 15 points. He was a +3, the second best plus-minus of any Pacer starter in this game. I already mentioned Mathurin. And Haliburton was good in the first quarter, and that was really huge because that tone setting mattered a lot for the Pacers. But the starters in general, just not a great night for – I mean, they were all good at various things and good at various times, but not a great night for any of them. The energy giving from the bench was the difference. And that is how the Pacers win a game that had no business being as close as it was, and their last home game before the trade deadline. A couple other notes about this game. Tons of free throws, 57 of them, but the Pacers were great at the foul line, 22 for 25. They've had a lot of games this year where they've shot themselves into perilous situations or shot themselves out of the game entirely at the foul line. They were pretty pedestrian from 3 at 36%. They were pretty good in the paint, but not awesome with 64. That's very good, but not exceptional. Free throws were huge for them, being very accurate there. The Hawks only made 1 more free throw despite having 7 more attempts at the foul line in this game. The turnovers and offensive rebound battle in general, that possession battle favored the Hawks. So the Pacers needed to find per possession advantages, and the rim finishing and free throws was a big part of that because the Hawks were doing a lot of stuff well in this game. I actually thought the Pacers did a pretty poor job defending Trae Young from a team level. They did a great job individually. I thought a lot of guys put pressure on him, made him get the ball out. But when they needed to trap him and then recover, or they needed to send 2 to him coming around screens, that's where they really struggled. I thought that was pretty interesting that, they've been defending well from a communication and team level for about a month and a half now. That's not usually where they struggle. It's usually more the individual part. I thought the individual part on Trae was good. The team level stuff was pretty bad. A lot of individual struggles on Dyson Daniels, no matter who it was. Nembhard, Nesmith, Haliburton, lots of guys had chances at him. He just cooked everybody. He was amazing in this game. That's something they're going to have to clean up. There's a lot they're going to have to clean up. They did not play particularly well in this game, and yet they found a way to win, and now they go out west for a chance to keep trying to climb the standings, improve themselves. This is going to be a tougher trip than people are going to give it credit for. The Jazz aren't very good. That's their first game, but it's in the altitude. The Jazz just beat the Magic by a hefty amount. Portland has won 5 of 6. Both LA teams are decent. If the Pacers go 3-1 on this trip, I think that'd be a huge success to come back 30-21 after the deadline with only 2 games to go before the break. And we'll cover it right here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Speaking of covering it right here on Locked On Pacers, tomorrow, mid-afternoon, so Sunday, I guess, will be Monday's episode. I want to put it out early, so it has lots of time to sit as the most recent episode. Nate Duncan from Dunked On, kind enough to give me some time to talk about the Pacers ahead of the trade deadline. Really, really, really fun episode. Really insightful about what the Pacers are facing financially, what stuff they could consider at this deadline. I was really happy with how it turned out and the discussion that Nate and I ended up having. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. Easton. This podcast is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you very soon.